Third forces, direct proof of God, which scientists' most unique research is strictly classified. Visual hallucinations are usually considered deception of the senses, imaginary perceptions, or perceptions without an object. Hence, it is customary to think that a mentally ill person suffers from visual hallucinations, sees what is not in space. Meanwhile, back in the 19th century, researchers discovered an interesting fact. Visual hallucinations obey the physical laws of light refraction. Let's start in order with the French artist Pierre Boucher, who in 1880 photographs visual images at random. One day after a noisy party, he wakes up in the morning to go to the laboratory and develop the pictures, and for a very long time cannot find them, and concentrates on work because he is tormented by noise in his head and images from nightmares. And the moment he develops the first picture, he sees not a photograph of his client, but just an image of these images from nightmares. Can you imagine? In 1885, Binet and Ferret noticed a doubling of hallucinatory images in space in patients with pressure on the eyes when a prism was applied to them. And later, in 1903, Stirring found the following. If the patient looked through binoculars when the vision seemed to her closer or conversely distant, it all depended on whether she was attaching an eyepiece or a lens to her eye. Despite the fact that the described phenomenon have been repeatedly recorded, no one has given a scientific explanation for them. In 1973, a 32-year-old Russian psychiatrist, Gennady Krokhalev, undertook to experimentally confirm the version that had existed for more than a decade, namely, visual images arise in the brain and are transmitted to the retina, from where they are emitted into space. And with the help of a device specially designed by him, Krokhalev was able to brilliantly confirm this hypothesis in practice on 203 patients. And here is what he said about his experiments. We put forward a hypothesis that during visual hallucinations, there is a reverse transmission of visual information from the center of the visual analyzer to the peripheral perceivers, with electromagnetic radiation of visualized images from the retina into space, which makes it possible to objectively record these images by photography. We set the task to test the possibility of objective registration of visualized images during visual hallucinations using a movie camera and flat negative photography films in light-tight black bags. And since 1974, I have been able to photograph visual hallucinations in mentally ill patients, mainly in alcoholic delirium tremens, alcoholic psychosis, proceeding in the form of hallucinatory clouding of consciousness with a predominance of true visual hallucinations, delusional disorders, changeable effects, accompanied by motor excitement and preservation of self-consciousness. Our hypothesis was confirmed experimentally. Photographing of visualized images in visual hallucinations was carried out in 203 mentally ill patients. Photographing of visual hallucinations was carried out with a Lantern movie camera using a diving mask, and instead of glass, the mask was fitted with a stretching fur from the photocore camera, and the camera lens was tightly attached to the narrowed part. The mask was put on the face of the mentally ill, and the photographs were taken in complete darkness. Photographing of visual hallucinations was carried out at a distance of 25 to 45 centimeters from the patient's eyes. This simple technique makes it possible to photograph visual hallucinations in any department of a psychiatric hospital, because the mask reliably protects the patient's eyes from any external light, and during the photographing, the nurse carried out a simultaneous recording of the patient's hallucinatory experiences on special cards. At the end of these experiments, control experiments were carried out in which medical workers and hospital staff took part as subjects. Control shooting was carried out using the same films and the same mask. Each especially completed card is signed by the doctor who conducted the experiment. Another method, photographing visual hallucinations, was carried out with flat negative photographic films 13 by 18 centimeters with photosensitivity of 65, 130, 400, and 900 units, as well as infrachromatic photographic plates 12 by 9 centimeters, infra 740, which were in light-proof black bags. During visual hallucinations, these photographic films in black bags were brought to the patient and kept at a distance of 20 to 35 centimeters from the eyes for 10 to 15 seconds. Patients were asked to describe what they see on the black bag, and at the end of the experiment, the nurse filled out a special card where she entered the patient's hallucinatory experiences. Control experiments were carried out under the same conditions. Photographing of visual hallucinations was carried out in 78 mentally ill patients. Positive results were obtained with 40 from clear frames to weak highlights, and the following photographs of visual hallucinations were obtained. Familiar people at the table, girl's face, old women with a long nose, white light, bright image of a crescent moon, a lion, fly, one, cat, puss in boots, a lid, nail, giraffe, square, brother, devil, beetle, jellyfish, point, mausoleum, plane, brass band, moment, church, spire of the Admiralty, bottle of vodka, human face, dolphin, moon. All positive results were obtained with the following discovered regularity. The lens aperture is almost completely open. The focal length is infinity. Some of the photographs were shown to recovered patients who confirmed their hallucinations. Control frames had no flares. In January 1977, the Committee for Discoveries and Inventions accepted from G.P. Krokalev an application for opening the number 32OT9465, formation of holographic images by the eye in the space of visual hallucinations. And in July of the same year, the above-mentioned institution accepted the second version of the application for opening number 32026963, formation of visual hallucinations by the brain in space. After some time, the author received a laconic answer. Your application cannot be accepted for consideration due to the lack of convincing evidence of the reliability of your statement, it said. The attitude towards the innovator in the USSR turned out to be the same as in the annoyingly sad past with heretics and cyberneticists. That is why the priority seemed to dissolve and did not become a registered domestic discovery. But by 1990, Gennady Krokalev had 33 publications on his research in different countries of the world: USSR, Japan, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, USA, etc. About 80 articles were published on his work, and 6 documentaries were filmed. In the spring of 1991, Krokalev received a call from Moscow, asked to send all the material on photographing visual hallucinations for 17 years, from 1974 to 1991. The researcher was assured that only in this case the laboratory will be allocated funding. As expected, no one else saw either money or materials. In his latest publication, Gennady Krokalev wrote, "I am reporting the following data. In 1977, Zdenek Radan, president of the International Association for Psychotronics, published in Japan my sensational article, Photographing Visual Hallucinations, Materials of the Third International Congress on Psychotronics, in Russian, and my research in Japan was classified. Krokalev developed a vigorous activity. He wrote books, gave interviews, was going to apply for a new discovery, which according to him should have brought him the Nobel Prize, but we will never know what kind of discovery it was." In April 1998, Gennady Krokalev unexpectedly committed suicide. Paranormal phenomena, myths and reality. The ancients were convinced that everything around them, including the earth and the sky, is alive, and all living things have power. Today, traditional science claims that evil spirits, ghosts, poltergeists are, at the very least, the inventions of unhealthy people. Well, that's not true. We've even seen angels in our church, not with our own eye, but with the lens of the camera, because the camera picks up frequencies that the human eye does not pick up. Anyway, going back to this. At the same time, independent researchers think a little differently. They are confident that modern science is simply not able to understand the nature of anomalous phenomena. At different times, thinkers who claim that our world is multidimensional have become social outcasts. In the 16th century, the Catholic Church sentenced Giordano Bruno to be burned at the stake for claiming that the universe is infinite and there are many other worlds. Bruno also defended the idea of transmigration of souls. He believed that a soul can move from one body to another, as well as travel in parallel worlds. Soviet psychiatrist Gennady Krokalev was one of the first in the world to step over the line that was forbidden for everyone. Having photographed the image of a ghost, he was able to unravel the centuries-old mysteries of ghosts and pick up a code for the other world. Psychiatrist Krokalev managed to film visions of mentally ill people suffering from hallucinations and visions back in the early 70s. He suggested that the pictures he received are nothing more than images of the other world which penetrate the brains of people with a weakened energy aura. Krokalev took his pictures using an ordinary mask for swimming underwater. In the USSR and later in Russia, doctors declared him insane, but secret laboratories were created abroad that worked according to his method. Krokalev was invited to international congresses, indicated that his discoveries were worthy no less than a Nobel Prize. How did the famous experiments of Gennady Krokalev take place? In ordinary hospital room, the patient has nightmares of hallucinations. His incoherent cries make it possible to guess what's happening at this time in his fevered brain. An elk is rapidly approaching him. The horror of impending doom is replaced by a new, even more terrible vision. During all this, the doctor puts the camera on the patient's eyes and takes several frames. After developing the film, the doctor sees in half of the frames a clear silhouette of a running elk, in the rest of the frames a snake, with the smallest detail distinctly in motion. The patient, who after some time felt better, confirms the correspondence of the displayed photographs with the nightmare experience. From 1974 to 1996, Krokalev filmed visual hallucinations in many patients suffering from various mental disorders. The experiments used a diving mask to create complete darkness between the camera lens and the patient's eyes. The scientists managed to take pictures of visual hallucinations in 117 patients. The coincidences were simply amazing. The photographs taken showed in the smallest detail what the patients were muttering about at the time of shooting: Puss in Boots, fish, elk, cat, man, devil, and many other, sometimes striking by their kind of images. Gennady Krokalev was able to prove that visual images of invisible ghosts, quote-unquote, arising in the inflamed human brain are transmitted to the eyes, from where they are emitted into the surrounding space. The psychiatrist suggested that all painful phenomena break off if the patient is in a shielded room, and when they leave it, they are reborn. Krokalev was sure that visual hallucinations in patients with mental disorders are of extreme origin. The so-called shielding effect proved the existence of an invisible astral world with negative energy in the appropriate manner influencing the patient. Krokalev's discoveries and experiments are today recognized in many countries of the world, while in Russia they are classified even after he tragically died. The scientist's daughter is positive that her father was killed because of scientific activities. Today, the concept of a ghost has become more multifaceted. There is evidence of sightings of ghosts of planes, ships, and even cities. Very often, images of ghosts appear in photos in the form of bright dots or blurry spots, which were not observed during filming. The first written evidence of human contact with a ghost dates back to the second millennium BC, 2000 BC, and it's written on ancient Babylonian clay tablets. It was also known that the fearless Roman soldiers who conquered half of the world were terribly afraid of ghosts. To protect against them, the warriors made sacrifices and worshipped unknown phenomena. But besides spirits, which can be both good and evil, there is true evil that penetrates from other worlds and infiltrates ordinary people. The procedure for driving out demons and other evil spirits from the human body with the help of prayers and rituals is called exorcism, and according to Christian tradition, Jesus Christ was the first exorcist. There is a mention in the Bible that a demon-possessed person was brought to Jesus and he healed him. The possession of a demon or devil is called possession, and there is a statement that several evil spirits can simultaneously enter a person. They connect to all organs of a person and his energy centers. The demon does not want to betray himself and manifests itself only during the church service and reading of special prayers. At this moment, the possessed feel as if they are in a hypnotic dream. He sees, feels, and understands what is happening around. While observing from the side of the possessed, it's clear that the insides of the body at the time of reading the prayer begin to shake. Curses and foul language are poured on others, and these demons do not want to leave the body and show their attitude towards people. The victim can hiss, growl, howl, grunt, scream at such a sound frequency that even animals cannot. And with the help of prayers and rituals, the demon leaves the body of the unfortunate victim, but sometimes those who observe this cannot stand it and lose control over themselves. For a demon, that is a great way to find another victim and hide in it, so that after a while take over the mind of the unfortunate to the full. Ghosts, demons, and other world. All these are paranormal phenomena about the nature of which mankind does not know anything. We don't even know the elementary way of the transmitting of the human soul from one world to another, but it really exists. Many questions can be answered even by studying our familiar pets. And according to researchers of the paranormal phenomena, cats have the ability to travel between worlds, and for this they do not have to die, according to other statements. A dog frequently recognizes a person in whom a dark force has infiltrated. This is so accurate and confirmed by the facts there is no answer. But watch your cat, how often it just disappears, and later as if it appears from nowhere. Astral world and third forces. Krokale's work could be factual, proof that thought is material, but the most important and most significant for all people is what was discovered during further research. Krokalev conducted a series of experiments and confirmed that if the patient is in a shielded room, all these images are blocked, and when they leave it, they are reborn. This possibly proves that voices in the head, visual images, and hallucinations are of exogenous, that is, external origin, which means that there is a certain field or subtle environment that very aggressively affects a person. In fact, this screening effect may be proof of the existence of the astral world with negative energy, which greatly affects the lives of people. And if there is a subtle astral world, then our secondary consciousness is the main source of images for us as individuals. If people who commit suicide under the influence of third forces could have been removed according to Krokalev's method, then we would have easily seen a picture of the substitution that is imposed on them. After all, people step out of windows, balconies, from roofs, but they see something completely different. This substitution is already taking place at the level of substituting the picture of a person's perception when he perceives the images imposed on him. For understanding, let's tell you that the third forces are what they are. Primary power is the power that comes from the personality, that is, from the person himself. The system itself is considered a secondary force of influence, that is, what we call a material thinking substance, absolute universal mind, or the devil, whatever we call this information field, that is, the external influence of the part to which our secondary consciousness belongs. And it is precisely through the secondary consciousness that such an influence of these third forces take place. If it is imposed by someone, it means that someone is using it, and this is worth thinking about. And let's go back to where Krokalev experiments ended. After all, it's clear that a person made the greatest discovery, that is, at least he should have been nominated for the Nobel Prize and should be known to everyone, and most of us hear for the first time that there is such a person. Let's consider what a breakthrough it was, and above all, in psychiatry, a breakthrough in our daily life, and as a result, all priests should keep his portrait at home because this proves the existence of forces from the outside, and therefore their correctness, thus religion. After all, the external origin of these mental images, first of all, proves the world of the devil, and therefore proves the existence of the spiritual world. If negative influences come to a person from the outside, and his animal or animal part begins to dominate in him, that means there is another part of a person, a spiritual component. Could this be direct evidence that there is a God? Krokalev did not receive any awards for this in his life, and in fact, no one recognized him, although he conducted research until the last day of his life, and since they were carried out, it means that they were financed by someone, but of course the public was not told about this. Let's see how the scientific environment perceived his experiments. Some said that this was undoubtedly a sensation and that Krokalev undertook the most unique research with honesty and decency. Others said that this was impossible, and when they asked Krokalev the question of why experiments were not allowed, he said that his experiments destroy Lenin's concept that thought is not material but ideal. In Soviet period it was understandable. After all, they outlawed faith and religion. But after all, he was also not given a chance to move abroad. After all, they knew about his work and it could be published in other countries, but there was also no response. And even, for example, Japan, on the contrary, classified the results of his research. But most of all, his ideas aroused resistance from colleagues who were destroyed over the years by the built scientific psychiatric concept that thought is a product of the activity of the brain. The scientific explanation was that all these images in the mentally ill in the alcohol ward arise as a result of disturbances in the activity of the brain. This was then the scientific explanation, and Krokalev, it turns out, was destroying this whole concept. Krokalev investigated mentally ill people with alcohol addiction, and their hallucinations were so pronounced that they could be photographed. But for an ordinary person, this did not go away. If you look at the subjects of Krokalev, they were people who took alcohol, drugs, and other drugs, and this is an important factor because it removes the protective barrier in a person and allows the secondary consciousness to absolutely manipulate him. These drugs weaken the primary consciousness so much that it categorically passes direct information from the person, who is called Satan in religions, and the person becomes a slave. That is, he becomes an absolutely controlled system. It's puppet or zombie. And if you take our society, how many people we see with rare glimpses of humanity when a person looks more like an animal than a person, because everything in this world is interconnected. Krokalev revealed that all these hallucinations are not quite a mental illness, and of course this destroyed the concept and caused tensions among colleagues. And we return to the most interesting, to the fact of Krokalev. After all, his research continued, but only in closed lobbies and laboratories. This confirms his words in the last family archive since 1995, where he says that, "I am not only engaged in psychiatry, I have already gone much farther into physics. I already have thousands of studies on the influence of psychic energy on reality," he says. He called the power of attention psychic energy, where a person puts his attention on a certain angle, then it begins to happen, and he really delved into this topic. Before he died, he was very cheerful while writing his 6th book, and as we know, committed suicide. Was the reason for the death of Grigory Krokalev a result of the impact, Gennady Krokalev, a result of the impact of what he studied? That is, those third forces. Secret territories and unclean power. Today, official science claims that evil spirits, poltergeists, ghosts, demons, and the like are at least the inventions of unhealthy people. Independent researchers think differently. They believe that the modern scientific world is simply unable to explain the nature of these strange and anomalous phenomena. This is astonishing and significant, isn't it? Taking pictures of what people are fantasizing in their brains. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. This is on Soul Ask. Thank you. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.